Greetings from the Alexandrina Council. Let's meet the driving force behind the Alexandrina community. Chief Executive Officer, Andrew MacDonald. Mayor, Keith Parks. Deputy Mayor, Councillor, Michael Scott. West Ward, Councillor Bill Coomans. Councillor Lou Nicholson. Councillor Michael Scott. North Ward, Councillor Craig Maidment. Councillor Sue Miller. Councillor Christy Thornton. South Ward, Councillor Margaret Gardner. Councillor Millie Livingston. And finally, Councillor Peter Oliver.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our council meeting of Thursday, the 26th of February 2026. Andrew did do a little bit of a microphone check and add a few words about the procedure tonight. I'll go through it again. We'll go through a bit more than we normally go through with so many people here, and probably a lot of people may not have been to a meeting here before. It is fantastic to see so many here, and your interest is appreciated, and we respect you being here to find out what happens, and just ask, as Andrew did, that you respect our meeting procedures and our process during it. It's not a special meeting, it's an ordinary meeting, and a meeting is devoted one item on the agenda, which is the South Coast Growth Strategy. So, for members, if anybody's standing, you're welcome to do so, but don't stand in the corridors or areas where there's walkways. It's pretty brave if you've got to stand all through it, because it's likely to go for at least a couple of hours by the time we go through deputations and the actual meeting process. And so, with so many here, if I ask for your cooperation to ensure that we can run the meeting effectively and all parties are treated fairly. We do have some ushers to help running things tonight, keeping things comfortable, and access and egress are kept clear, and make sure that people can. We've set some stuff up so that people can hear wherever they are. At times throughout the meeting, you're likely to hear things that you may not agree with, and things that you just don't agree with. But please don't get into the temptation to clap or cheer or call out or abuse somebody that's speaking that's inappropriate. And I ask you to remember that it is an official meeting, and I ask you to respect both the people and the process involved. Just remind you that it's an offence to disrupt the meeting, and I'm sure that nobody wants that to occur. So, can you still hear me? Sorry, I was talking away from the microphone, reading my notes. Also, with so many present here, it's potential for any side chatter to affect other people's ability to either hear what's happening and understand what's happening. So members of the public in the foyer and the library area, we ask you to be respectful of everybody here and keep your comments to a minimum. In the event of an emergency, please look to and follow the instructions of the ushers. Our emergency assembly area is on the lawns in front of the medical centre next door. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with the Local Government Act, applicable regulations, codes and policies. An audio recording of the meeting will be made for minute-taking purposes, and that will last the length of the open meeting, and the audio file will be available on the council website. You will also see that we have South Coast Television here making a video recording of the meeting, and that will also become available online. Please note, an open council meeting is a public place, and there should be no expectation of privacy. Also, that there is unlikely to be any legal protection or other privilege attached to any statements made in this meeting. Would you please place any phones or smart devices into silent so that they don't interrupt the meeting? And Andrew mentioned earlier, but for those who have come a bit later, the toilets facilities are straight through from the gallery on the other side of the foyer. So I'd like to welcome our elected members. We have no apologies and no leave of absence, and nobody absent at all. We also have in attendance our Chief Executive Officer, Andrew MacDonald, our General Manager Community, Stacey Bateson, our General Manager Infrastructure, Alan Harvey, our General Manager Corporate, Tash Hunt, our Group Manager Regional Development, Matt Atkinson, Manager of Governance and Communications, Lachlan Miller, and our Minute Secretary, Tanya Cregan, and some of our other staff are here as required. Now, if you're able, could you please stand for the local government prayer and acknowledgement of country? Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to grant Thy blessing upon the works of this Council. Guide us in our deliberations for the advancement and the true welfare of the people of the district. The Alexandrina Council and its communities acknowledge the Narrandjeri, Paramount and Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of our council district. Thank you. So, if a council member has a conflict of interest for the purposes of Chapter 5, Part 4, Subdivision 1, Subdivision 4 of the Local Government Act of 1999, in a matter which will be before the council at this meeting, they are asked to disclose the interest of the council and provide full and accurate details of the relevant interest at the beginning of the meeting. And members are reminded they must deal with the conflict of interest in accordance with the relevant positions of Subdivision 4 at the time the item arises for consideration. So item 2 is adjourned debate. There is none. Item 3 is presentations and deputations. We have 5. So
Mayor Parkes, could I ask a question, please?
We haven't got the questions yet.
Last Monday night you told us that there were 5 deputations. Were there any other deputations received?
There was one more, so there were 6 altogether. 2 of them were late, and one of them was declined because the maximum is 5, and one was declined and offered to come to our next council meeting.
Could you explain why it was declined?
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Coomans. So the Code of Practice of Meeting Procedures provides for 4 deputations in the ordinary course of affairs. 4 deputation requests were received prior to the cut-off, which is 7 clear days before the meeting. The Mayor considered those against the criteria contained in the Code of Practice of Meeting Procedures and accepted all of those deputation requests. Following the closure of the 7 clear days, 2 additional deputation requests were received effectively late. The Code of Practice of Meeting Procedures provides the delegation to the Mayor to accept 1 additional deputation if it's determined to be of sufficient importance and urgency that it has to be considered at the meeting. So he only has the delegation to accept 1. He assessed the 2 deputation requests and made the decision to accept the one that he did on the basis of that criteria of sufficient urgency and importance. And as Mayor advised, the other late applicant was advised that they could make their deputation or be considered to make their deputation at the next ordinary meeting of council.
I'm going to move under Clause 6 of the Regulation 11 of the Local Government Act, Meeting Procedures. I'm going to move that the deputation by Ms Lewis is heard at this meeting. And I wish to speak now in relation to the reasons for that. Yep, okay. Most times I think I'm a reasonable person who's prepared to listen to everyone with a view and provide a considered response and act accordingly. But I'm quite angry about this because I think Ms Lewis has been a long-time target from certain members. The headings on the deputation form indicate 2 are about the whole of Area Q and 3 seem to be more specific about the Traeger land only. Area Q is the main issue tonight, and Ms Lewis is a resident of Middleton but not adjacent to the Area Q, unlike other deputies who either live adjacent to the area or overlook Area Q. Or they live a long distance away near Nankita and really don't understand the situation in any case. She has had more than 7 years involvement in matters of planning associated with Goolwa and Middleton and should be treated as a relevant and knowledgeable contributor to the debate. She has provided much information about this matter over an extended period of time. It should be noted that she was a mayoral candidate at the last election, only losing to you, Mayor Parkes, by a handful of votes. So there may be a question of fairness on your part here. One must also remember the times you were involved in bringing questionable behaviour actions against her during the last period of council and having her removed from the CEO performance panel where she was an active and brilliant participant. In my view, on grounds of having a conflict, you, Mayor, should have disclosed the 6th deputation request earlier and put it in the meeting agenda. Both Ms Lewis and Councillor Nicholson are independent candidates for the state seat of Finniss. Both have lodged nominations as noted in the ECSA list of candidates. If Ms Nicholson speaks, it is obvious that she is also electioneering. That to me will not pass the pub test. If I was in her position, I would declare a conflict of interest and leave the chamber. In fact, I would have sought a leave of absence earlier, just like a council member in the Victor Harbour Council did. So I ask the CMs to support my motion, despite some having issues of a personal nature with Ms Lewis. And I say again, Ms Lewis deserves to be heard. Who knows, she may be our local state member of Finniss after the 21st of March. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? No. A seconder? Councillor Livingston, do you wish to speak? So if there's nobody wishes, any other questions or comments from anybody? Councillor Livingston, Nicholson.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I've taken some notes and I note the qualification for an additional speaker was sufficient urgency and importance. We've got 5 people speaking to us about this issue tonight. What further information can the Chamber know to qualify this extra deputation as sufficiently urgent or important when we've already got 5 speakers talking to us about a range of aspects of the issue before us tonight?
We don't have that deputation request here with us, but if necessary, Lachlan can go and get it. We're just going to bring up the application on the screen so you can see it. Would you like me to read it out? So the people in the lobby in the library won't be able to see that. So it's regarding Area Q, specifically the Traeger's land. So several months ago, after visiting the Traegers, I realised that no one had approached the state government regarding the land in question. As the community has been extremely vocal in wanting a conservation reserve, as have the Traegers in the past, and appear to still have this position, I approached the Traegers and ascertained what they wanted to do and sent a submission to the Minister of the Environment. Her Chief of Staff has since been in touch on 2 occasions and is pursuing this with the Minister. He is aware that the meeting is taking place this evening and that I need some kind of indication from the department as to their appetite for the proposal. I will give a short outline of the proposal and an up-to-date account of where it is sitting in the department. I believe my solution will have a calming effect on all parties and give the elected members valuable insight into their decision process. So that's the application. Give you a couple of minutes to digest that. So, are there any further questions or discussion? Councillor Nicholson, you've already asked a question. Yeah.
Question. May I ask, Mayor, what your rationale was for proposing that this deputation come to us next month, and I suppose why you decided that it was not sufficiently urgent or important for this evening?
Well, in discussion, recommendation C in the agenda talks about the environmental component of the land and the referral and our working with the government to try and get a satisfactory solution. So we figured it was reasonable that we're not going to go to the government tonight. So we get to this stage, and then when we start to talk to the government and try and negotiate and start to head down that track, if that's the way we go, depending on the result, then the ideal time to do a deputation on that matter would be at a meeting. So we would do that at the next meeting. So we still would hear all about it, and it doesn't take anything away from the desire to both protect and expand the environmental area. Any further discussion? You'll close the debate, Councillor Coomans. You have a right of reply.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Parkes. I guess I'm not satisfied with that explanation because when I looked at the 4-2 motions without notice, and bear in mind that this comes under the state government legislation, a matter of such urgency and importance that failure to consider it at the meeting would be likely to result in detriment to the council or community. So if the solution is that she presents next time, that really is too late, because tonight is when we're making a decision on this, and I think we need to hear all of the information that's available. And thank you for reading that out, because I was going to present that. You read that out in about 2 minutes. Each presenter is allowed up to 10 minutes. So there's probably more information that she would add. So I'm far from satisfied with this. I think we should hear her. And maybe one solution is that if we've heard all the others, if they don't mention the sorts of things that Miss Lewis has, then we should give her the voice, because I think this is far from satisfactory, and I sincerely believe that deputation should have been contained in the agenda, so at least we could see it while we're deliberating the report.
That ends the discussion, so I will put that to a vote, put that to you. All those in favour? Against? That's lost. Back to where I was talking about the deputations. So, as I said, there are 5. In accordance with our Code of Practice for Council meeting procedures, we, as Lachlan explained, he's gone ahead of us now. We took the 4, we took the extra 1 by delegation, and that was as far as we could go without a resolution of council. So the order of the deputations and the agenda was determined by drawing the names out of a hat to ensure a fair and unbiased process. I can assure you I sat in the room and I didn't touch the hat or the numbers. It was done, they came out and I was quite surprised the way they came, but that's how they came. For the benefit of the deputies and members of the gallery, the standard deputation is 5 minutes. However, the deputy can request an additional 5 minutes, subject to the leave of the council being granted. The way a deputation works is that you come to the microphone, then address the council on the topic. There could be more than one speaker, but it's in your request what you've asked for. When there's 1 minute left to go, to save me interrupting you mid your discussion, Lachlan will ring a bell to indicate you've got a minute to go and start summing up, because I want to be fair to everybody. I don't want anybody going over the 10 minutes if they take 10 minutes, and then we get criticised for giving somebody more airspace. And then there'll be up to 5 minutes for questions of the deputies from the... So as I said, please, members of the gallery, show your respect for the deputies, allow them to present and listen to them, and they're all here for a good reason, you're all here for a good reason. So thank you very much for your cooperation. Item 4, oh no, sorry, I'm getting more bits of paper here than I normally have. So presentations and deputations, 3.1 is the deputation from Mr. Mark Laurie regarding the Middleton sand mine and the South Coast growth strategy. Mark, would you like to come forward? And would you like to 10 minutes?
Yes, please.
Are members happy with that? Yep, thank you. Oh, sorry, I'll leave it that. Like I said, we need to leave at the meeting that you support the 10 minutes. I need to see the hands. Okay. Just tonight, because we're in close, hands like that won't work. I need hands up here. I need you to hold them up while I look at them. When you're further away, I can see, but I've got screens and I can't see people. So, in favour? Against? It's carried. So, Mark, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Parkes, elected members and senior council management. I'm a resident of Middleton. My wife Sarah and I have a business in Port Elliot. Relevantly, I have some history of senior executive roles in the resources industry. I'm currently a negotiator and policy advisor for the Papua New Guinea government, primarily in relation to large resources and infrastructure projects. I'll first turn to why this deputation is necessary. A detailed review of the history of the proposals to rezone and develop the Traeger land parcel has shown that the support of the Chamber over the last 12 years has, in some part, been solicited on the basis of concerns about continued sand mining. Despite this, it appears that at no stage has the Chamber been provided with independent information concerning mining activities on the site. This compounds the lack of any community consultation having occurred with respect to such proposals prior to 2024. Mining is permitted under the terms of South Australia's Mining Act and the terms of 2 extractive mineral leases granted in 1978 and 2003. Leases are granted for fixed terms and are subject to the rights of review and an ability to apply for and be granted extensions. The current leases are due to expire in August 2027, subject to rights of review and renewal. The leases impose a range of conditions on mining activities. Importantly, they include the need to provide at least a 30-metre wide densely planted screening along the main road and the western boundaries of the lease, progressively rehabilitate the land to the satisfaction of the Chief Inspector of Mines, ensure the land is rehabilitated after mining is completed to achieve a regular landform, minimise erosion and return the land to grazing. Also, to operate in accordance with a program for mining and rehabilitation approved by the Minister. These conditions and others are provided for within the Program for Environment Protection and Rehabilitation, the PEPR, prepared by the operator and formally approved by the Minister. The latest version relevant to the Middleton sand mine is dated April 2021 and is available to the public. This document is a legally binding representation to the state in line with the lease conditions and state mining and environmental legislation as to how operations and rehabilitation are to be undertaken. They are subject to audit by the Mines Department and operations conducted out of kilter with the Act and can lead to penalties remediation requirements and loss of leases. Important elements within the PEPA of note in the present context include constraints on mining related to environmental and Indigenous cultural assets, and requirements for staged as well as final rehabilitation. Relevantly, representations are made that no native vegetation will be cleared without approval under the Native Vegetation Act, and controls are agreed to minimise the threat to environmental and Indigenous values. You can see from the slides that the PEPA contains quite specific requirements for progressive and final rehabilitation of the land. Progressive rehabilitation is an important and practical means of managing the impacts on the landscape as mining is conducted. It's required to be done sequentially with mining and in a timely way to reduce exposure to erosion and help ensure water flows don't spill out onto neighbouring properties or into environmentally sensitive areas. It's also a means of helping to manage the visual impact of operations. This map, included in the PEPA, shows how the operators have said they will undertake progressive rehabilitation and meet their legal requirements under the mining leases. It provides for 6 stages of mining and of rehabilitation in increments not greater than 3 hectares. It's worth noting that the maximum 3 hectare area referenced is less than 10% of the overall Traeger land area. It's also worth noting the large area of native vegetation and wetland. I turn now to the use of mining's threatened effects to support the push for development in the past. In 2013, and in the first piece of correspondence we found on the Council's website relating to these long-running attempts to rezone and develop the Traeger's land, a one-time offer is made to transfer ownership of the wetland portion to the Council in return for the rezoning for development of the remainder. In the letter, reference is made to the potential detriments of continued mining on the site and the landscape, including the wetland area. Later, an electronically generated impression of the ultimate extent or scale of the mining operation is prepared and sent to the State Planning Commission on 10th of January 2020. The image is then resent to the EFPA review inquiry on 28 July 2021 as part of an attempt, ultimately rejected, to have the EFPA overlay removed from the site and allow rezoning for residential development. The words and image used appear to be profoundly incompatible with the terms of the mining leases and the binding representations the Traegers have made to the state government in the PEPA. They're also very difficult to reconcile with the mining area in the PEPA and with obligations to ensure mining does not impact upon environmentally and culturally sensitive areas, mine and progressively rehabilitate in 3 hectare blocks, not remove native vegetation without appropriate permits, establish a vegetation screen of at least 30 metres width along the main road and the western boundary of the lease, and also ensure that the site is fully rehabilitated at the end of mining with topsoil replaced and a cover crop established to prevent erosion. The image is particularly noteworthy as it's been published very recently in the Fleurieu Sun as part of an article entitled Traegers Respond to Area Q. In that article, a Traeger spokesperson is quoted stating that if the land is unable to be bought by a developer, the Traegers will have no choice but to seek expressions of interest for someone to continue to mine. Here, continued mining is clearly being used as a threat and an inducement to accept residential development as the least bad outcome of the two. However, as I will return to, mining will stop while housing is forever. A community perspective. It appears to have been assumed that the communities of Middleton and Goolwa, and of Alexandrina more generally, would prefer rural living and residential development than continued small-scale mining. This has never been tested with the community. I also note that mining operations in the community have coexisted since the late 1970s. We would like to provide a different perspective, one where the community recognises the Traeger's right to mine on the land, closely notes and understands the conditions upon which such mining is to be conducted, including constraints, buffers, staged rehabilitation, and final remediation. And the community also understands the processes involved in reviews and renewals of leases and for any modifications to mining operations. That perspective sees the continuation of small-scale mining in a manner consistent with the leases and the PEPA as preferable to rezoning and residential development. This is because there's no remediation and rehabilitation available once residential development is undertaken. Importantly, the Traeger land lies in the middle of the open buffer separating Middleton and Goolwa. Residential development there fatally compromises that open separation, the thin end of the wedge, with Oakford homes who have made their own submissions waiting next door. As the Department of Environment and Water, the EPA and various peak conservation bodies have written, there are also real and present concerns that residential development would be expected to compromise environmental values, not protect them. This is my last slide. We like this image. You may recall it was used by my colleague Ian Wood for his deputation to you last month. It was part of a master plan prepared in 2007 while the mining leases were in place, involving consultation between the council, the community and the State Planning Commission. 2007 is not long after the Traeger's failed attempt to establish a cement batching plant on the land while it was zoned rural fringe, sometime before any attempt was made by them to rezone and develop it. I note that one of the key reasons the community opposed the batching plant in 2004 was the importance that, and I quote, the long-term sense of separation between townships be continued and improved, not further eroded away. This is around 20 years before the recent village conversations, when the townships of Middleton and Port Elliot rated township separation as their most important issue, while Goolwa rated it second. It demonstrates the continuity of this concern. The same approach was captured in the state government's 30-year plan released in 2010.
Mark, excuse me, that's 10 minutes.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of points to make.
Okay, I have to do the same for everybody else, that's all.
Yep, I guess we've been waiting 20 years and perpetuated in the garb. We like it because it so effortlessly and effectively bats away any alleged technicalities about rezoning errors and township boundaries, tying in with long-standing community views and council and state intentions. We also like it because of the vision for the area it outlines, a green conservation and recreation space, protecting the separation and identities of our South Coast townships, and an environmentally and culturally important area. Thanks to the Dennis family, the state government, Ben Simon and colleagues from Second Nature, and the council's professional planners, amongst others, it's a vision that remains achievable over the longer term. Will this chamber now take a leading and positive role in helping establish a legacy for South Coast ecology, amenity and future generations we can all be proud of? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation. I'm just noting that you're representing a coalition of residents and ratepayers, and multiple times you refer to we in your presentation. You know, here at Council, often there can be a perception that when some development or a project is opposed, there can be some personal interest. Not my view, but there can be a perception that there are some personal interests, such as living adjacent, having a view disrupted and things like that. So I just wonder if you can give us some detail about the number of people that you're talking about in the coalition, and when you say we, and what their interest is in this.
Yes, it's a disparate group. I think there is a core group of around, I guess, 50 to 70 people who are actively involved in this, and then there is a group who are actively supporting it of well north of 600. It's geographically not credible for them all to be have their backyards affected by that, of course. They come from all over Alexandrina. I guess there are those within the group who could be described as being adjacent to Area Q or the Traeger land. I guess they're surely entitled to ask why on earth is their view worth any less than a small group of families and corporate interests who stand to benefit very directly and clearly and economically from a development proposal. I guess the last thing is, and a lot of people are attracted to in our group, is that there's a greater opportunity here. And where, I mean, an organising facet of the group is that this be turned into a conservation area, and it's going to take time. And that's really for the benefit of future generations of ratepayers and visitors to the area. So that'd be my answer to the NIMBY argument.
Any other questions? No, so thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for your presentation. 3.2 is a deputation from Margaret Castles regarding the Area Q rezoning proposal and the South Coast Growth Strategy. So welcome, Margaret. And do you require more than, do you require 10 minutes?
Yes, I do. We do.
We do.
Thank you.
Welcome, Cedric. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, members, all in favour of allowing 10 minutes? Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I'm very honoured to introduce Cedric Varco to talk to you about this land from the perspective of his people before I talk about a more broader conservation vision.
Cool.
Thank you, Cedric.
Welcome. Can you hear me? Yeah. Squeeze on this side. Well, coming in, I stand here before all you as a Ramangiri man, as a sovereign person of this land that we're talking about tonight, and a cultural custodian who wants to protect my ancestors' artifacts, remains, and history that is within this area tonight. For the thousands of years, this area that we are talking about, Area Q, was probably one of the early openings of the main mouth. This area slowly changed to what we see today. The water flowed from the northern side of Port Elliot Road into the rivers and streams into this wetland that we see on this map here today. The tea tree plantations would have extended right through Traeger property, surrounding areas, and gone inland from here. Would have been used by our Nachis, all the wildlife, birds, to breed and prosper. Some of these tea trees that remain there today are over 500 years old. The water flow and tea trees were made around this area. Our feasting, our ceremonial gatherings and trade, tea trees were used in Narangiri culture to prepare our beloved ones who had passed in a cultural appropriate manner. They were lifted into the tea trees and could spend up to a year or more resting in these tea trees while this cultural ceremony has taken place. The trees are used as a platform to support them, to support the deceased. The elders, the tree, the more connected with the spirit world and the ancestors. At some point in its life, it would have been used to connect the deceased to their journey into the spirit world. As time passes and the cultural ceremonies that take place for our loved ones, then they were interned into the ground. This burial was generally within a few meters of a tea tree. And the tea trees were made sacred spots for our burials and funeral rituals. The resting and feasting generated as large families would gather, made large mittens throughout this area. And as a general note, wherever there are mittens, in 98% of the cases that you find one, there's always going to be a burial within it. Tukima, the area of Tukima, of my people, is not just Tukima Reserve that you know today, but it's the general area, including Area Q. I personally have gone down last year as I'm in sorry business right now, coming to speak with you, I actually wrapped 5 remains of my people that was taken from this area. That was found in the 50s and into the 70s. And they're taken and given to the Adelaide Museum. Stone artifacts and tools and seaweed cloths was unearthed in Tukima and given to the Adelaide Museum. The agreement tells us that this site is sacred for our people. Narundri's wives had stopped there, as well as Narundri. The Corny Agreement is associated to this place, and our people camped and lived among this region. As they camped and they moved on to Kangaroo Island, this place holds sacred place not only for my people, but for all of our Miwi that is connected to this region. In 2002, in conjunction with Ngarrindjeri elders, a report was confirmed that the existence of an extensive shell mitten throughout Traeger land and the land to the east and the west. We know that mining activities have destroyed mitten sites and others that was unearthed through this process to the eastwards. Into the recycling facility, this was confirmed in a sidewalk around in the 1980s and then in the 1990s. The extent of Aboriginal significance was noted in a letter from the Department of Aboriginal Affairs on the 1st of August 1914 and given to the Alexandrina Council Policy Officer, which is noted. Mayor Parks and councillors, this is the last of the land of significance, some of the last, for our people, our elders, and community members and leaders like me, the Southern Flurio. There are many people here tonight that wish to protect, with Ngarrindjeri and Ramandjeri, from land, from further development, to leave for future generations, including so our culture can continue to be told and respected and continue to be connected and protect this place for the spirit and the sacredness that it has. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric, very much for explaining how important the whole of this area is for your people. I'm going to be talking about the conservation aspects of this, but obviously the Ramandjeri people have looked after this land for tens of thousands of years, and I guess if they were still doing that, we wouldn't be here having this conversation today, would we? So I just want to mention very briefly that I'm talking, this is not a scientific report. I've tried to pull together a big picture of some of the scientific and environmental issues that I think you would need to take into account when making your decision today. And so it's going to be fairly broad-based and with some maps drawn by me that look a bit like a 5-year-old might have done it, but I think I'll get the message across, so I hope that makes it clear. The first thing I wanted to talk about is that, just to describe on this picture, that we've got Area Q, which sits in between Port Elliot Road and a vast area of land that is already under heritage protection and conservation. There's Tokemore Reserve, there's the Tea Tree Swamp, there's private heritage land which is being developed, I think, over to the left near Botcher Road. There's quite a lot of community conservation planting going on. Scores of community organisations and individuals have worked in this area over the years, and indeed those areas capture some of the very last remaining examples of types of ecosystem in there. There's the tea tree swamp, there's coastal heathland, there's all sorts of other bits in what is kind of a jigsaw of ecosystems across that area. So what's happening in these spaces? Very, very quickly, we've got the magnificent tea tree swampland, which Cedric was talking about and how that relates to his old people. There are acres of samphire amphitheatres on the top right that fill up with water in winter and then get lots of birds coming into them. And then fanning out from that central area that you can see in that riverland area in the middle, fanning out from that area, you've got different ecosystems. You've got some excellent examples of coastal heathland, you've got some grassed areas, you've got some limestone flats with different types of biodiversity on it. So it's a really, really diverse set of ecosystems that come together to make up this whole system. And whilst the blocks in Area Q themselves don't look like much, there is still valuable rare plant communities, protected stands of vegetation and remnant vegetation on those areas too. And I'm talking about them all in a holistic sense. I'm talking about this whole block of land as being one piece, because biologically everything on it is interconnected as part of a big interconnected ecosystem. And a lot of these are quite unique. That's not 10 minutes, is it? Oh. I don't think anyone has any doubt about the conservation value of this land, but what I would like you to take into account in thinking about the possibility of development across this land is the impact that that might have on this very fragile ecosystem. I've done a bit of a mud map there of how water moves across the land in general terms, and you can see that it comes from the higher point across Port Elliot Road and from the sky, falls on the land, it seeps down into the land, it percolates through limestone and sand, and eventually it finds its way to that very precious swampland. Unfortunately, water is also the enemy of wetlands. They are extremely fragile communities, and what we find is that pollution, runoff from roads, nutrients from using fertiliser, bits of plant material and seeds all get washed down with flows of water across the land.
Excuse me, Margaret, that's 10 minutes, but I'll let you go a little bit longer like we did with Mark.
Thank you very much, I'm sorry. So there's a significant risk to a vulnerable ecosystem of changing the land use in a way that enables large quantities of water to fall down on the land, run across the top of it, which will happen, and go into the ecosystem. And you don't have to do much more than a bit of a search on Google to work that out, but this is actually based on, proper scientific understanding. The other thing that people often don't think about when they're thinking about the effect of water across the land, effect of development, is that if you bring development and human activities close to a natural area, you get all that stuff on the left, but what you also get is predators, pests and other intrusions. So if you bring housing, even if it's large blocks of housing close to a natural area, what you're going to also find is the foxes, the cats, the mice and the rats that come where we go when we build houses and have animals on the land and do our farming and do our fruit growing and have our barbecues. It brings the predators with us.
Sorry, Margaret, that's about it. I'm sorry.
Can I just...
A couple of words.
Yeah,
They've got to be fair to everybody.
That is going to have a significant impact on this area. Can I just very quickly, I'm really sorry, say we live in an area where we know what nature is about, and we're very proud of it, and it's really valuable. This is the last little bit of nature left along this coast. I'm using the same map as Mark did. My vision is that the council and the community can see this as an opportunity to make this into something better than it is now for future generations, and I would ask you to do that.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
And are there any questions?
Oh, I probably don't deserve any. I went for too long.
Councillor Thornton.
I have one for Cedric. Is there an Indigenous overlay on any parts of Area Q that you know about?
That's actually a good question. Close to in the boundary of Area Q, there was some artefacts and things like that had been found. And also because of the time frame since our history has started to be respected, my belief is that nobody has come forward from this family to even let us know if they had actually found or discovered anything that was potentially other remains or ancient tools or bone tools or anything like that. But wherever there's wetlands, you're always going to find there's going to be sites there for us, of our peoples. Because they're not just confined to what we know as Galway, Middleton, Port Elliot. They're right along the coast, so they stretch right along the coast. So wherever you walk, you're going to find mittens, or you're going to find burials, or you're going to find stone tools. And once you start digging into them, you will definitely find them, because that's thousands of years of occupation and connection and living and gathering at some of these places. But as the old people going through, and what I've been told, none of our elders could be present today is because we are actually, a lot of us are going through sorry business at the moment, so I shouldn't really be here tonight because I'm actually, my own family is dealing with sorry business. But some of them were families of the elders who had walked this country, and they were the ones who are no longer here today to tell us what they had discovered and what was found or what was spoken about at that place that I've tried to contact and talk to about. But this place has not only cultural significance, story significance, and you can see the history there, but also, you know, people fear of coming forward and letting us know that they might have found something. So it could have been damaged, it could have been destroyed, we don't know. And we haven't had a chance to actually explore the site in itself always, you know, for many years now. Because, you know, no relationships have been formed or anything like that with landowners and our community, so that we can assess and also look at what's going on. We know some of these things have been found here. I know some of them that have been found there, and I know personally because I was the one that actually wrapped and preparing some of the stuff to be reburied now. But they're not going to be reburied at the site, they're going to be taken to somewhere else now. And that's really heartbroken on my miwi, is because we are actually breaking our law by moving our people to another place so that we know that they're going to be protected. And when are we going to have the opportunity to protect our sites? When are we, as Ramanyiri and Naranyiri, going to have the opportunity to keep our history, our culture in the ground that it has always been for thousands of years? When are we going to get that opportunity? And I ask you all to use that. I ask you to think about that. Think about not only tonight, think about that when you go home, think about that for into the future, think about that when your children and grandchildren are working with us and discovering some of these sites too. And, you know, because it's all of your obligation, it's just as much as it's my obligation too. Thank you.
Thanks. We can cut the clapping out if you wouldn't mind. We love Cedric's present. I love Cedric and what he stands for. Are there any other questions? No, thank you very much, Cedric and Margaret, for your presentation.
Thank you. Nothing else.
So 3.3 is a deputation from Sandy Ricks, and it's regarding the Traeger land and Area Q as part of the South Coast Growth Strategy. So welcome, Sandy. And do you need 10 minutes?
Yes, please.
And everybody in favour of that? Yep, that's fine. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to speak. And this is primarily based on research that has been done, evidence-based mainly, and my presentation is really in three parts. The first part is about state-driven zoning changes, covering Area Q and the Traeger land, and the startling number of attempts to rezone Area Q and the Traeger land that have occurred over the last 12 years or so. The second part is about the degree to which the developing Area Q and the Traeger land does not align with relevant planning strategies and policies. And the third is about the constraints the recycling and waste depot might impose on the Traeger land and Area Q. So, in summary, next, does it go up? In summary, what I'm suggesting to you, members, is that the zoning changes to all of Area Q are really in line with state directives. They're not a council mistake. They're really a result of the Better Development Plan program. The EFP zoning overlay, which is the prime policy document, does not just talk about food production areas, it addresses rural landscape environmental areas. Previous zone changes and submissions and support from our research anyway were council chamber driven, not council staff driven. Submissions repeatedly about changing the zoning, the submissions have been repeatedly rejected at state authority and ministerial levels over 11 years, and they've also been rejected in the GARP and the predecessor to the GARP. The GARP is a Greater Adelaide Regional Plan. The predecessor was a 30-year plan. Area Q and the Traeger-land have never been in a growth area in these strategies. So I think Council, and also, look, that quite important policy that the Alexandrina community is showing that it's very concerned about this area and wants to keep the separation of townships. So I'm arguing Council has a responsibility to protect some of their long-term assets and respect the views of the community, and therefore protect Area Q from unsuitable development. There's the map showing where it is. That's Area Q. The red area, number 7, is the Traeger-land. Number 10, right next to it, is the dump or the recycling depot. Margaret's talked about the other areas quite a bit, so I won't dwell on that one too much. I think your members know about that. This is just a little extract from the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, which just shows that there are no future growth areas designated between Middleton and Goolwa, between the current neighbourhood zones or the current built-up areas between Middleton and Goolwa there. Turning to the original fringe zone, the objective of it there is up the top, but really it was abolished essentially, removed by the state-led Better Development Plan program. It hasn't existed anywhere since May 2014. And also residential land division overlay has been put over that area, resulting from evidence of the Mount Lofty Ranges primary production areas review back in the 1990s. So really this proposition that perhaps the council's made a mistake, whether it's the staff or the members or whomever, this is not true really. This is state-driven planning change. So after rural fringe, the primary production zone came into effect over Area Q and the Traeger-land, and then a rural zone. And really the rural fringe zone could have, was divided perhaps into 2 zones in the Better Development Program, either deferred urban or primary production. And really the only deferred urban areas were the ones that were shown in the state development strategies as future growth areas. This area was not shown in that area, specifically excluded from a deferred urban zoning. There are overlays also curtail residential land division in primary production zones to protect high value economic and primary production areas, but also because there are lower population projections coming through, and there was a lot of uncoordinated, unconnected land division around many rural and tourist area townships, which sounds a little bit familiar. So just a little bit, it's not commonly known that, in terms of hierarchies and which planning document takes precedence, the overlay takes precedence over zones, subzones and general development policies. And what is the overlay that's relevant here? It's the EFPA overlay, the Environment and Food Production Area overlay. This overlay is not just about food production and primary production. It's also it was aiming to contain urban sprawl, reducing the ability to subdivide housing, and once again, protection of valuable rural landscape, environmental and food production areas from urban encroachment. So this slide is really one of the crucial ones, I think. I hadn't really known until we did all this research just how many times the council and members of, representatives of the Traegers have lobbied council, lobbied ministers, proposed change, and just a number of them up here where the statement of intent, which I think was prepared as a privately funded code amendment or DPA back then. I think Craig, Mr. Rowe probably wrote part of it or co-wrote it with the council. That wasn't supported by the minister. A lot of lobbying has gone on. The mayor, CEO Rowe and Associates, others have all lobbied the ministers for planning, and their proposal to rezone this area has all been explicitly rejected. Once again in the EFPA review of 2021-22, and the EFPA is basically reviewed every 5 years, And once again, representations from CEO Rowe for the Traegers, and he also acted for a couple of other people in Area Q, were explicitly rejected. So you've got these numerous submissions over the last 11 years concerning the, based on perhaps the argument that there was a rezoning error from rural fringe, and they've been rebuffed by 3 planning ministers, council staff, planning consultants, the State Commission, and by dint of State Parliament endorsing those regional plans, State Parliament as well. So turning to the second part of my presentation, just about the strategies and policies that don't support urban development in Area Q. There's the South Coast Growth Strategy, although we're here once again tonight to perhaps see what happens there. Secondly, there's the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan. This plan is less than a year old. It was only endorsed in May 2025, and it explicitly did not identify any of Area Q or the Traeger land for future growth. Its predecessor, the State 30-year plan, did the same. No residential urban development envisaged in Area Q or Traeger land. And also the long-standing policy directions of council have been to preserve land between townships, and that's been going on for more than 2 decades. So turning from strategies to principles not supportive of urban development on the Traeger land, there's a bit of jargon, planning jargon, but it's not orderly nor economic in terms of infrastructure provision and all sorts of things similar to that. It's not a logical extension of any urban area. It's quite an isolated area. It's adjacent to this significant wetland, and we've heard from previous deputations about the significant environmental significance of the land and the land adjacent to the Traeger land and the land adjacent to the Traeger land. Waste disposal and stormwater runoff is quite a challenge near a very significant wetland with environmental and cultural significance. Land contamination, there are a couple of so-called expert reports about that, but that's also a concern. The known significance, we've heard from Mr. Varco, about the Aboriginal significance, and of course it's adjacent to the dump. So turning to the recycling facility, that's what the EPA said. This is not suitable for residential development. Since that time there's been composting, expansion of operations, and the effective buffer for composting is at 1,000 metres, and that covers all of the Traeger land and quite a bit of Area Q. So in conclusion, why have there been so many repeated attempts to rezone this Traeger land when the state strategies, planning policies have all not supported it? It's inconsistent with so many planning and professional advice, strategies, policies.
Excuse me, Sandy, you've got about a minute to go. We've gone 10 minutes, but the extra minute, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. So, and it's inconsistent with the long-standing wishes of the community and the concepts of town separation and identity. So I'm asking you, as a resident of Kitely Road, Gore Beach, my dad's in Sandpiper Lodge, he's lived here for 30 or 40 years, but also as a planner and also representing a wider group, that really I'm asking you to make a decision to fully protect this area rather than go against all the advice that I can find to identify it for urban development. There is finally I just say there's some real hurdles to, that I've pointed out, I guess, to getting this land to urban development, and I'm not sure I have a bit of sympathy for the Traegers. I'm not sure they've been really well advised, maybe the council also, but we have to remove the EFPA zoning, we have to change the zoning, convince the state to make it a growth area, get rid of the recycling depot and change community opinion. Can we do all of those? Most of those things, in my view, are insurmountable, and therefore the path forward is obvious to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Sandy? No, so thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Scott.
Just very quickly, I missed, or didn't quite hear exactly about the buffer that you were talking about between the waste depot and any developmental land. Did you say 1,000 metres?
1,000 metres for composting.
Right. It's less for other forms of...
Yes, it is. Other forms of waste recycling, it is less, but for composting it's 1,000 metres due to the possible odours and all sorts of other wind-borne issues. That's the current EPA position.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Sandy. Thanks. So 3.4 is a deputation from Mr. Craig Rowe regarding the Traeger land, Area Q and the South Coast Grocery. So welcome, Craig.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you for the opportunity.
You'd like
10 minutes,
please?
please. Yes, thank you very much.
10 minutes? Yep, thank you.
Members, I'm going to throw away my PowerPoint presentation because there's been a lot said today, and I think it's imperative that we touch on some of the points that were made today. I'll firstly talk about the Aboriginal heritage issue. The Traegers have been mindful of the Aboriginal heritage significance of the tea trees for years and years. And in fact, when we first lodged a submission with Council in November of 2013, when the subject land was zoned rural fringe and we were entitled to lodge an application to initiate a proposal to rezone, that was the logical step that you could take at the time. We produced a lot of documentation to Council to support our position in a number of issues. This is a report done by the Australian Cultural Heritage Management Company, dated 2002. It was done prior to the second mining lease being granted by the Department of Mines. It was an action that had to be undertaken. It's a 45-page report. It was done in conjunction with the Nurrunjeri Heritage Committee, and the current mining lease conditions were based on this document. Now, I've got to also say that since 2013, I personally have consulted with the Nurrunjeri or 4 different organisations within the Nurrunjeri on a number of occasions. And in fact, the last time I consulted with the Nurrunjeri, Cedric was the person that I was talking to most of the time. And the groups that we talked to over the years have been the Nurrunjeri Heritage Committee. They came out to the site on 2 occasions and inspected the site while we were there because we were telling them about where the development might occur. We had the Nurrunjeri Regional Authority, we had the Nurrunjeri Aboriginal Corporation, and we had Miwi Inyari Pelepiambi Aboriginal Corporation, and Cedric was at that. Now, on every occasion, we offered the Nurrunjeri the tea trees, the wetlands, 11 hectares of land at no cost to absolutely preserve it for the Nurrunjeri. They still come, there's members of the Nurrunjeri who still attend the site in the tea trees. They come along and they speak to Dig Traeger. One of them's Roger Richards, and they go in, they're allowed to go into that land. They're allowed to gather what they need out of it. They take youth in there and teach them the ways of the elders. This suggestion that there's been no consultation or that with the landowners is just bewildering, because I've been there. You know, this document shows you that pictures of the Nurrunjeri elders that were there when the assessment was done. So we are bewildered with that claim. And for us to sit here and listen to the fact that, or suggestion that we've not consulted with them. Look, we tried to give them 11 hectares of land that was so culturally significant to them that they just wouldn't give us answers. So that in itself is a little bit of a worry. There's a couple of other things I've just had to scribble down some notes to make sure that I could cover off on some of these issues that have been suggested. I think, firstly, The Traegers have been on this property for 50 years. They're not fly-by-night developers. They are hardcore community-minded people. You know, Mr. Traeger's done a lot of community work. He's done it for nothing with his earth-moving business. These are not people that are just coming in and just trying to make money. These people are elderly. They're 88 and 85 years old. They're not in good health. They're frail. Why can't they do something with their land? It was zoned rural fringe, and I appreciate what Sandy's talking about, but in 2013 it was zoned rural fringe, and it enabled you. The next step from that to get it into residential would have been, in those days, I think PAR that would have been. I'm looking at Matt. Was it PARs in those days? DPA in those days, was it? Right. So, you know, we followed due process. We followed the process that was in the legislation at the time. It's the same like today. If you lodge an application today for a building and the legislation changes tomorrow, the planning authority has to assess your application on what was in place at the day, on the day that you lodged. We hadn't formally initiated a code amendment or a rezoning, but we lodged with the intention of complying with the provisions that were in at the time. So, you know, we were following due process. Council followed due process. You know, what we're seeing here today is we're seeing a retrospective review of a planning proposal that was done 12 years ago under legislation that's changed 2 or 3 times since then. You cannot clearly and realistically assess an application on the provisions today because they're 12 years. You know, the provisions have just changed so much. You know, we talk about the EFPA. You know, our proposal was in before the EFPA even existed. And in fact, the EFPA came out about the same time as the minister rejected the council's SOI. It sat in the minister's office, just so happened to have sat in the minister's office for 20 weeks whilst the EFPA provisions were being prepared. And it wasn't just our provision. This council supported another rezoning at the same time for Middleton Road East, I think it was. And that sat there the same, and that got the same treatment. The minister was saying, EFPA doesn't comply, can't support you. It's what's been happening has all been people looking at what we've done retrospectively and using today's provisions rather than yesterday's provisions. Interesting documents that come up, and you see that it says that there's supposed to be a buffer between Middleton and Goolwa. The original GARP, 2010, has a plan that shows that there should be a buffer protected between the townships. And I'm going to try and find that for you, because the pointer on that, this is the one down the bottom in the middle, it says protect open space, anyway, between Goolwa and the pointer points directly at Tockamore Reserve. And there's Newell Avenue on the left, and there's Bolt on the street on the right, and there's 1.1 kilometres of Tockamore Reserve in the middle. That pointer in no way infers that that buffer should be anywhere else but along the coast. Now, we can argue that, but that's what it does. Interesting enough, because this is the first version of GARP, the current version, as it was said, that came out in May, doesn't have that buffer. It has no words about that buffer, and it has a plan, which is a really ugly one, that's as good as it gets. And if you look there, the Traeger land and Oakford Homes land and Mr Broadbridge's land and the Smiths land, there's absolutely no indication that there should be a green belt or a buffer or an inter-urban block. There's nothing there. So what are we supposed to do? There's this long-held belief that there's got to be separation distances between the council, between the townships. There's nothing in law that says that that's a requirement. I mean, I could go on for ages. We talk about, there was a suggestion about the impacts of wastewater and stormwater over the property. Here's the stormwater and wastewater report done by ARIS in 2017. It takes on board everything, and if I've got a second, it says here, and this is in the report, the estate will raise the bar as a purpose-designed project that will substantially or sustainably and beneficially manage waste and stormwater that will provide environmental outcomes which will not only protect but enhance regional environment assets, including the natural lagoon system. You know, if you're going to poke sticks at us for not doing things,
sorry, Craig, you've got just over a minute.
Yeah. We got a site contamination report. You know, all that work's been done. We're not coming in here asking for council to do something that can't be done, that can't be put on the ground. We've done the homework. All of this other stuff. Ask the question of how does GARP get changed? The only way you can change GARP is do a code amendment or through strategic plans or do the review. Go through the review. The first review that they did in respect to the EFPA, there were 3 changes made in Victor Harbour, and they were boundaries over the back. There were probably 600 applications for changes that were rejected by the department. Not just this one. Everything that went there basically got rejected. You can do your homework, ring them. You know, as I said, I'll show you the plans of what happened at Victor Harbour. It was just that the boundaries didn't match property boundaries, so they moved them. Nothing else got changed because the government wasn't going to do it. You know, it's easy to poke us with sticks. Thank you.
We're out of time.
Done.
Are there any questions of Craig? No. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Craig, very much. I'm just wondering, we had a comment before about the 1,000-metre buffer required for any residential development that would be around the current waste facility. Yep. What's your understanding of that buffer and any limitations there?
Our original consultation with the EPA occurred 10 or 12 years ago. At that stage, we were told that there was a buffer requirement that could be a buffer requirement of 200 metres, and it could be as high as 500 metres, but the indication to us was that that was subject to consultation and negotiation with the EFPA. So we took that on board, you know, and I think at that stage, I think the legislation now says from the boundary, when we initially did our work with the EFPA, this was in fact a landfill site. And it's not a landfill site anymore. And so there were significant changes. So the EFPA have basically said to us, when you get something more substantial and you know what's going on, we will look at it.
Councillor Maidment.
Yes, thank you, Craig. Can you explain what farming activity occurs on that land, and was there any significant native vegetation over the Traeger land specifically?
Over the whole of the land?
No, over the Traeger land.
Yeah, just Traeger land.
What's the farming activity there, because it's zone rural? And what about any native veg or displaced fauna and things like that? And is there an opportunity for stock to wander off into that conservation area?
Previously, the land has had cattle on it, about 12 head of cattle, and they have been into the tea trees in the old days. We've got to remember that the nature of this allotment is it's virtually all sand. So it grows very little, the water just soaks through it, it grows very little. It was excluded from council reports done some years ago about identifying primary production properties that needed to be retained. This particular site didn't even get a Guernsey in it because it was set aside, it couldn't be used for primary production, and it was ultimately set aside. It was excluded from that because it was in the rural fringe zone, and it was being set aside for, well, in people's minds as a future urban development site. You know, those provisions in that day specifically excluded any form of development that would prejudice the urban development of that site. That were the words. So if you wanted to build a hotel or something on it, you couldn't do it. If you wanted to put a piggery, we can put a piggery on it today. We can put a slaughter yard on it today. But we can't graze anything on it. It would be an absolute waste of time unless you were doing it for a hobby. Now the water comes from, a lot of the water comes from the northern side of the road through 2 culverts and floods the Traeger land and the land to the west. It's a legal arrangement done by the Department of Transport because years ago there was a small water course through there. But the amount of water that's been collected and directed onto the Traeger land floods the pit, the mine pit. And it sort of contributes to what happened in Newell Avenue years ago when it flooded. So this land is almost unusable for a primary production purpose. We are the first people to put our hand up about the environmental significance. We drew that to Council's attention in November 2013. We asked Council, specifically asked the Council of the day, did they agree with us that there was absolute, the land in the 11 hectares was of significant environmental significance. And the council came back and said, yes, we had the council's environmental people give us documents on it. So we were trying to convince the council to rezone it to conservation. So any suggestion by anybody that we are not looking after this property.
We're sorry, Craig, we're out of time. Sorry. No more questions. Over time. 3.5 is a deputation from Anne Traeger-Spees regarding the Traeger land and the South Coast growth strategy. So welcome, Anne. And do you need 10 minutes? Yes, please. All in favour of that? Yep, thank you.
Yes, it's on. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation because, unlike all the experts here, I'm just an expert on my family and our family experience. And I won't apologise right now because this is highly emotional. Firstly, thank you, Mayor and elected members for the opportunity to speak. I was the one that came in at a latter date after I was unaware that it was closed for deputation. I'm grateful that you took mine into consideration. I'm Bevan Dick Traeger's daughter. I was born in 1971 at South Coast District Hospital and I attended local schools. I'm here tonight because we have been failed on so many levels as a family for so many years that I don't have the words anymore. I don't have the words. I'm not here by choice though. This is so out of my comfort zone compared to what I do on a daily living. I'm not a politician. I didn't stick my hand up to become a councillor to take a bunch of flack, which I know you all take, and you take it every day. I don't have thick skin. I'm a healthcare professional. I care about people. I'm here because a very small group of people, and I do not include likes on a Facebook page as people that are behind all of this. They've taken it upon themselves to control the narrative around the Traeger land. And I'm here absolutely hating every second of this, purely to take that control back. Because it's not their story to tell. The architects of this group have intentionally been conflating the Traeger land throughout all of that with the whole of Area Q. Have they intentionally cast my family as the villains in this story and them as the saviours? Why would they do that? I have a theory, because it does suit their cause, and so much that makes me angry about this, like Craig just referred to, a huge part of your cause was our cause. That was our cause, and you can say that, oh, it was just a nice little nudge, we'll give you that if you give us this. That is not true. The protection of that area, like Craig said, has always been at the forefront of any proposal that we put forward. I want to know, where were you all then when we were trying to give away this land? Give it away. Give it away. We didn't want state money. Give it away. Where were you all then? No one was interested then, and I have a theory that maybe it didn't do anything for their own self-interest at that point. And yes, NIMBY, you have mentioned the word NIMBY, and for people that don't know what that means, not in my backyard. Ironically, the Traeger land is not in either the front or backyards of any of the people driving this campaign. Mr Yates lives on Betcher Road, and his house is on land that was a big paddock when I grew up. Maybe we've been mistaken as oak for homes. Maybe that is who actually deserves this pylon. I don't know, but I haven't had time to start a Facebook group. I'm a busy woman. I'm here because we live in a world where misinformation thrives online. Facts are distorted to suit the needs of those who hide behind keyboards and don't even have the courage to stand up here tonight. They send their neighbours.
Excuse me, Anne. And sorry, you need to address the council, not the chamber.
Okay.
So that is a behavioural thing.
Okay.
Control.
Sadly, community members that follow these groups are not always privy of the alternative motivations of these people and what information is factual or designed to inflame and divide and is largely focused on self-interest. As Craig's already said, my family's involvement in this community spans 4 generations, and I'm not going to waste my precious time here to go over in so many ways that has happened. Essentially, they did this before the time of social media. We could all say how wonderfully noble good deeds. No, they just got on with it. That history, though, does not entitle our family to special treatment in no shape or form, but it does mean that at least we should have fair treatment in this argument. Evidence, integrity and accountability guide both my professional and personal life. I deal in facts, I don't exaggerate, and I don't retreat when the truth is uncomfortable. I speak here tonight clearly without a gallery of support to defend what should never have needed defending: my family's reputation. My brother Glenn, who died unexpectedly in 2023, shared our vision for this piece of property. During community consultation on this growth strategy, critical information about the Traeger land was omitted. Was this by mistake or by design? Our family's been accused of scaremongering, apparently, and despite not knowing anything about the mining leases, that the Traegers were just trying to scare people by threatening to buy this land. Those statements and omissions are not harmless. They shape public opinion, undermined informed feedback and fostered mistrust in the process. Because accurate information was not publicly available, misinformation has flourished, and my family have become the target of online hostility, suspicion and accusation. You as elected members have also been accused of lacking integrity by this same group. As you are aware, these accusations are baseless, defamatory and corrosive. Let me be clear, my family has never supported the development of Area Q. In fact, Area Q did not exist until, what, a brief second ago. If rezoning proceeds, our desires to protect that conservation land is at the forefront of our decision. That land is not abstract to me. I would argue that I know those trees and wetlands better than anyone in this room. That land, trees and wetlands were the stage and the props of all of my brother and I's childhood adventures. It is where the clearest memories of my brother and my childhood lay. I spoke of those at his funeral. I felt the love and support of nearly 1,000 people on that day. I feel threatened today, and I feel like I should be wearing a bulletproof vest instead. Protecting that land on its environmental responsibility, cultural sensitivities, my family's history, and our deep and profound loss. I dare anyone in this room to challenge me and my family's commitment to that. And I'm done. I'm done.
Thank you, Anne. Did anybody have any questions? Oh, not that Anne's, no, she's not going to be there to answer them anyway. So that brings our deputations to an end. Item 4 is petitions, there are none. 5 is questions with notice, there are none. 6 is questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just interested in the land that is Newell Avenue and the homes or properties that are built there. When were they built and how were they permitted to be built?
Through the Chair, thank you for the question. I can't give you an exact date of when they were built, but it was certainly built prior to the Planning Act of 1981 that came in sometime prior to that would be the answer.
Are there any other questions without notice? Any others? No. So we'll move on to notice of motions. There are none. So item 8 is administration reports. 8.1 is the South Coast Growth Strategy. Matt, is there anything to add or change or to that report?
No.
No, thank you. So there's a recommendation there with Group A, B and C. I'm happy to do them either individually or en bloc, whichever you wish to prefer. Councillor Livingston, you're moving.
Individually, thank you. Individually, thank you. Recommendation
so
Group A.
You're moving Group A?
Yes.
Are you speaking to it?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Parks. I'll keep this brief. I just wanted to note a few things which I understand, and I, in particular, just at this point, do want to thank administration for the amount of resources that it's taken to get the strategy to us. Probably likely that it wasn't anticipated to take that amount of resources, but nonetheless do want to thank them and each of the planning staff for their contributions.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Maidment? Do you wish to speak to that? Group A. So that's it. So we're talking about Group A. Is there any questions relating to Group A? We're only receiving and noting a report. Councillor Miller.
Sorry, I can speak? Is that what we're doing? Okay. Thank you, Worship. I also recognise the meticulous and significant work by administration in preparing this report. And I'm just going to talk about a neighbouring council to the north of us, which is continuing to, and will be for many years to come, being shaped by the lessons of a 2010 rezoning decision of the state government, where rapid growth, which was state-led, that proceeded without coordinated infrastructure, and services planning. And that's still playing out now, 15 years later, and that's still only 25% of what's coming. There's a book that was published in 2021 that tells the story of Mount Barker, and it's by an author called Yvonne Routledge. In that book, the former mayor of Mount Barker reflects on a pivotal moment in Mount Barker's history and the challenges it created for the community. And there are, Your Worship, parallels to tonight's agenda item. And I'm just going to quote very briefly some excerpts from that book. In 2010, 1,300 hectares were rezoned by the state government, and that turned the place upside down. It was gazetted and went ahead, and there was a massive challenge for the council. There was no structure plan from the state government. There was no social structure plan. Council had to prepare a structure plan as to what was required to look into the future. How many ovals, how many kindergartens, how many schools, how many shopping centres, a sewerage system, how that would manage. How is council going to manage water? Council had to look at what was needed for halls, parks, libraries, sporting facilities. There was not 1 square inch put aside for sporting and recreational schools. There was a wee little patch put away for an industrial area that was way off the highway, so it would never have worked anyway, and it goes on. And that's the end of what I'm quoting. There are parallels to what the decision is that we're making tonight. The state government, once again, is requiring the heavy lifting in that planning space to be done by local government, by council. A lesson from that was that local area plans for housing and essential services and transport and social infrastructure need to be done. But that's at council's cost. And councils are being asked to do those local area plans. The state government's not doing it. So a lesson from that terrible experience was that, well, we need to plan, which is great, but you do it, council. And I understand that because we are best placed to understand what is important to our community and what it needs. And I do hope very much that the actual delivery of what's required in renewals, upgrades and new infrastructure will be funded by significant state and federal funds. There are councils now all over the state grappling with these same issues. It's just on an exponential scale and there's no funding. We had a briefing session on Monday night that spoke to the growing pressures alone on our existing wastewater system, a huge risk to this council into the future. Not because it hasn't been planned for and the ultimate professionals looking after it, but just because of the scale of what's coming our way. And we haven't yet turned our minds to transport or social infrastructure or recreational infrastructure. So I'm happy to note this report. I think it's a very good report, but it's not the beginning of the end. It's only the end of the beginning for us. The beginning of what's ahead of this council in structure planning terms and how we fund it. Our residents and ratepayers, visitors, future elected bodies and administrations. It's a burden and a blessing. This is a pivotal moment in Alexandrina's history, and I'll speak further to that when we debate the strategy itself, Your Worship. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Group A? Turn your microphone off, please. So if there's no further discussion, no, you don't right of reply, so I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. We now go to recommendation Group B. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Maidment, you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, with a slight addition to that. Okay, so I'd like to include the Traeger land component of Area Q, and I'll speak to that.
You need to specify exactly what you want said and where.
Approve the South Coast Growth Strategy as provided at Attachment 1 with the inclusion of the Traeger land component of Area Q. Because in that strategy, it's taken out. and I'll speak to that. Right. Okay, so I wish to test the Council's appetite to include the Traeger land within the South Coast Growth Strategy. I believe we have a moral obligation to discuss specifically the Traeger's land for rezoning, given the support by Council since 2014. Without direct consultation with the landowner, this land was rezoned from rural living to rural, and in reading the timeline of events, it appears that the Traegers were blindsided when their land was rezoned without their knowledge. Clearly, this parcel of land, which now sits within the environmental food production area since 2016 and contains a sand mine, is not producing food, nor is it likely to. It's too small a parcel for a viable farming enterprise, and not recommended for the introduction of livestock due to the close proximity of the conservation zone. The Traegers own approximately 29 hectares of area Q, with 18 usable for rural pursuits and 10 hectares of sensitive wetland. So only a portion of Q is what the Traegers are asking to be considered. In fact, further mining in this area could possibly continue for many decades should the land not be turned to other uses. It's on record that the land which Traegers own within the conservation zone was going to and is always going to be preserved. I'm wondering if only the Traeger land, with the extensive historical background of events leading up to tonight's decision, were put to all 358 respondents to the community consultation, would there have been a different result? There's an opportunity to consolidate all privately owned parcels of land within the conservation zone, and we should absolutely pursue that avenue. Council's role within the reserve is restricted to maintenance, risk management and protection of reserve values rather than active recreation or infrastructure provision. Since 2021, under the new statewide planning and design code, protection of the reserve is afforded through environmental overlays which control what can and cannot occur. Protections that apply are conservation first land management, coastal environmental controls, native vegetation protection, cultural heritage safeguards, restricted access, and no support for urban or commercial development. Any proposal affecting the reserve would face strict environmental scrutiny. Residential development on the remaining Traeger land would have a lesser impact on Tuckamur Reserve than that which currently exists with developments along Newell Avenue. I do note that there's about 7 vacant blocks left on Newell Avenue, and there's 3 houses under current construction. These houses sit directly above the conservation zone, have no direct connections to a sewage scheme, have in the past removed native vegetation and built on the sand dunes which we are now trying to preserve from further encroachment. I see plenty of township separation should this land be developed, with the conservation zone all the way to the beach to the south and further west. Of course, an EPA buffer will need to be considered from the adjacent Frawa transfer station, a matter for negotiation with any developer. We have been told that the Minister for Planning has provided advice to administration that there will be no change to the EFPA, but only last year the government sought to remove the boundary for a housing-driven expansion north of Adelaide and various boundary changes previously at Victor Harbour. So I think that the Traegers have seen that this situation is not, their situation, is not cast in stone. There may be a possibility of ministerial intervention. Therefore, let the Minister decide on the future of this parcel of land. It's a state planning matter after all. If the Minister's decision is no, then this would close out any future proposals to change the zoning for many years to come.
So if we're talking about Group B, is there a seconder for that, Councillor Oliver? Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, please, Mayor. Area Q and whether the mining lease is included as a conservation preservation item is one of the most contentious issues. I consider the opportunity to repatriate the lease into housing by private interests and finances to be an appropriate alternative to the mine, and importantly at no cost or risk to council or the community. The coastal and township buffers can be maintained. I've also listened to the opponents, and their arguments are very well made. Cultural and environmental considerations are significant, and the vision for a new conservation park is grand. I support this vision for Area Q generally. And in fact, I'd like to see it expanded to include the rubbish dump area as well. But there's a lot of history here also, and I think it's fair to separate this from the rest of Area Q and subject it to proper state government assessment, which has not occurred at any time yet. They are the responsible body who will make the final decision. So let's refer it to them. Thank you.
So is there any further discussion, questions? Councillor Gardner.
This chamber has discussed and listened to various members from our community tonight, and many times in the past. And there are many reasons for not including Area Q. There are detailed concerns that have been raised by the State Government Department of Climate, Environment and Water, the Fleurieu Landscape Board, Second Nature Conservancy, including our own Climate Emergency and Environment Advisory Committee, who made a recommendation in September 24 at their meeting. The Greater Adelaide Regional Plan did not include Area Q. And there are many reasons to avoid placing housing in this area. One of the biggest is that housing will be in the wrong place, because while some people believe that there is not necessarily a buffer, I have heard in many of our community consultations, both in Port Elliot, in Middleton and in Goolwa, people say, we need buffers between our towns. We don't want them joined, and the bigger the buffer, the better. We have environmental sensitive areas in that area. There are risks of potential flooding, which scientifically take water into that area. And we've had a scientist talking with us tonight who knows about these things. There's the environmental sensitive wetlands, of course, and the paperbark tree forest, which is simply beautiful, and we certainly don't want that damaged. And I recognise that Traegers are saying they also believe that that is an important part. But it is time for us to make a stand on Area Q so our community know where council stands. If there is wavering, we will be following previous chamber decisions on relying on the minister to make another pronouncement of no to the development of Area Q. And in fact, today, one of our councillors said to me on the phone that we can put in Area Q and send it off to the minister and he can make the decision. Personally, this sounds like hiding behind your mother. When you're a little kid, that's what you do if things annoy you or upset you. You hide behind your mother. Others might say, like Shakespeare in Macbeth, that it's about being lily-livered, that is timid, and there are other words that could be used. We don't need to hide behind the minister. Let us be brave and clear. We need to listen to everyone and we need to act without emotion. We need to look at the facts, and we have seen the facts. We've been told over and over by council staff. To follow previous chambers would produce the same results, a tiny glimmer of hope for the landowners, who I have enormous sympathy for, and their hopes dashed again by the minister. Why on earth would we want to put the landowners through more grief? Haven't they been through enough pain? Why would we want to put our community, the whole of our community, into that position? Why would we want to put ourselves or the next council in that position?
Councillor Gardner, over time, you can quickly sum up.
Thank you. When we come to recommendation C, I want to alter the recommendation and recommend that we request the federal and state governments to acquire and compensate the owners of the environmentally sensitive areas on the land of Area Q. This will be a small action that this chamber will have done for the owners of the said area. I want you to think very carefully. Vote for the vote against this recommendation. We need to vote for the South Coast Growth Strategy as it stood initially.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Worship. Colleagues, tonight is difficult. The room is full, the pressure is high, and many of us have been approached, lobbied or appealed to. Personally, I want the best for every individual in our community. I want every individual to get what they want. But our responsibility tonight is to sound planning, to evidence and to the whole community that we represent. The South Coast Growth Strategy before us that was recommended initially was the product of years of work, professional analysis and extensive consultation. It aligned with the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, which requires Council to prepare a local area plan showing how we will meet the housing targets that we need to. The strategy did exactly that. And I want to be clear, we are not short of growth options. We are not under pressure to expand into unsuitable areas. The strategy already identified sufficient appropriate land to meet future demand. So the question before us is not where else can we grow, what other options can we put in? The question is, will we uphold sound planning principles or will we bend them? Because that is what the debate around Area Q has become. Let me speak plainly. Area Q does not follow established planning principles or logical township expansion. It was not supported in community consultation. 78% of respondents opposed it. It is not required to meet future land supply. It has already been rejected by successive state planning ministers. It sits within the current EFPA zone, and it contains significant environmental, cultural and landscape values recognised by multiple expert bodies, and that is unargued in this room by anybody. We have been presented with documented concerns from the Conservation Council, the Hills and Flurio Landscape Board, the Coast Unit of Dew, the Nature Conservancy and our own Climate Emergency and Environment Committee. These are not fringe voices. These are the people tasked with protecting the very things our community tells us they value most. We've also heard about the EFPA buffer around the the EPA buffer around the waste facility. It is worth stating that any idea that we would move an entire regional waste operation at enormous cost to enable development within Area Q is unrealistic and irresponsible. And the argument that the towns are already joined because Newell Avenue does not reflect what our community, because of Newell Avenue, does not reflect what our community actually means when they talk about township separation. They're talking about the experience of place, rural character and open landscape, the sense of arrival and departure from our towns. I want to acknowledge something openly. Many of us have been approached with personal stories, frustrations and long histories of this issue. Some of the stories are very compelling and as we saw tonight, they are emotional. Naturally, we do want the best outcome for all of our residents, but allowing this to guide our statutory decision-making would breach our behavioural standards and undermine the integrity of this chamber. We are not here to adjudicate past disappointments, and we are here to make decisions for the future of our whole community. Our reputation matters, not just with our community, but with state government and the minister who will ultimately assess this plan. If we submit a strategy that contradicts expert advice, contradicts our community consultation, contradicts the GARP and contradicts established planning principles, we will not be taken seriously. We will weaken our standing, and it could undermine our ability to advocate for the things that truly matter as growth continues in our region. I urge you tonight not to vote for the motion that has been moved, and I foreshadow the original motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Thanks, Mayor Parks. I'm assuming others will want to speak as well, and I guess I want to be last. I think in a general sense, I support the infill area proposed in Goolwa High Marsh Island, the area L around Goolwa School and area M, and modified to avoid industrial buildings near the main road, and that was referred to as employment land. So instead of supporting what was hopefully will be an attractive larger allotments with residential housing. Area N, which is a deferred urban land in West Middleton, is being planned for larger allotments and is also worthy of support. Work still needs to be undertaken on the all-important Middleton bypass for heavy transport, which may affect the lands north of Area N in future consideration. But I do want to talk specifically about Area Q, which is why most of the gallery is here tonight. When Council first considered the draft South Coast strategy going to public consultation, there was much discussion on this Area Q, and in fact there had been lengthy debates on this in this chamber over years and years about the rights of the mining area owners, which we know is the Traeger's land. My suggestion at the time was that we should separate this out of Area Q and designate it accordingly prior to it going to consultation. Unfortunately, that did not happen. We already know that the Traeger family were quite willing to donate some of their land for conservation purposes and wanted to retain some of the land fronting the main road for high-end housing on parcels of land of some 1,200 square metres each. And the developer builder being Scott Salisbury. This was worthy of exploration, and community comments specifically on this would have been welcome. Unfortunately, this opportunity remained as part of the total Area Q rather than being a separate part for housing and being a separate part, and the opponents jumped on this as an argument that all of Area Q would probably be divided up for housing and maybe another Mount Barker or Seaford Meadows would result. This was never the case, and not one member of this council nor administration were ever in favour of this, and I doubt so was the Minister and his department. So sadly, we have a gallery full of opponents who may have been a little misinformed and are here demonstrating opposition to the destruction of conservation land, removing a buffer between townships, potential flooding effects, impact on rural character and the like. With that, we are all on the same page. Initially, I thought these larger blocks with fine housing replacing the current mine site would be very attractive entry to both Goolwa and to the north and Middleton to the south. What put it all into question for me was the development proposal for a triangle of land as you enter Middleton from the Port Elliot direction. It's called Area B, where because no CWMS system is available, that the blocks would be some 1,200 square metres and would also create a great entrance to Middleton from the Port Elliot direction. However, this changed when I attended a presentation to the Middleton Community Association by the developer. He was saying much smaller blocks, a reserve located centrally for stormwater purposes, houses looking inward with fencing around the perimeter of the development, and stormwater through conservation area to the sea. I thought, no, this cannot be. So that put my mind in a very uneasy position in relation to the intentions of the Traeger land, when there wasn't a guarantee that maybe the same could occur. So the option that the Traegers have, to my mind, is to lodge a private code amendment submission to Land SA for a development, and in line with what I described, and for Council to then become the respondent to the proposal. At the end of the day, it is the Minister, whoever that will be, will make the decisions. And this is the tough part. I've now considered the report, heard the deputations and debate, and sadly my vote therefore is now not in favour of the motion, and I have sincere apologies to the Traeger family for that.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I understood we were debating the growth strategy, not a strategy for Area Q. So that's how I framed my debate. I'm very appreciative of the deep engagement occurring within the community on this topic. My personal knowledge and understanding over the past 3 years since I was elected of the recent and prior history of decision making and the progression of the South Coast growth strategy has grown exponentially in that short period of time. I am surprised, however, that all we're hearing about tonight is Area Q, apart from Councillor Coombs mentioning Area M. My understanding continues to evolve tonight, and I thank the deputies very much. I acknowledge the complexities, emotions, differing motivations and tensions. I commend those who have maintained their dignity and professionalism and acted with honesty and integrity throughout this whole process. I recognise the expertise of the administration and steadying influence of council leadership. It has been no easy task for any of us to navigate. But I keep coming back to, what's the problem we are trying to solve here? The problem is the state and federal government's growth target problem, and more locally, the problem for us started with the Goulburn North Code Amendment, and now it's morphed into where we are today. And that's about the future. Our challenge is to deliver a holistic vision and articulate objectives to achieve a longer-term vision. This strategy is really a policy instrument, and history tells us that with any policy or strategy, it can and will be tested, regardless of the decision we make tonight. And there remain other avenues to do just that. A decision needs to be made. Back in December 25, I said, it's master planning is fundamental. If you want new, expanded or upgraded facilities, you need well-managed and planned development. Incremental infill won't get us that. There is a huge and unmet demand in our region for housing, community and recreational facilities and improved infrastructure, public transport and community and social services and local employment. Master planned communities expedite the delivery of these and relieve councils, importantly, of significant and upfront infrastructure costs. We've been talking about this for nearly 3 years, and I'm nearly finished. So for me, when it comes to casting my vote, I've come back to what my role here is and the responsibilities I have to hear the debate, serve the broader public interest, act morally and responsibly, calmly, and consider future generations. I have no objection to the Traeger land being included in this. The rest of it, I do agree, can be preserved, and I have no doubt that it will be. It's never been in question in my mind that any of the land that's been discussed tonight would be preserved. It never entered my mind that it would not be. It did not come across to me from anyone in any discussion that it was at risk. All I can say is that my vote will reflect what I've heard, what I've researched, what I understand, the emotion, the sincerity, the facts, the process, the incredible amount of energy and work that's gone into this. And I do thank everyone for being here tonight, but this is bigger than Area Q. And I hope that we can compromise and help everyone through this. So my vote's going to reflect what in effect this strategy is planting a tree under whose shade I probably won't ever sit, and many of us in this room won't. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Livingston?
Thank you, Mayor Parks. I want to start by saying thank you to all that provided feedback through the South Coast Growth Strategy and for those that have made deputations on this matter. Clearly this is a matter which has caught the attention of a significant amount of residents within our district. What I'm disappointed about is that this is a South Coast Growth Strategy. It is not the Area Q Growth Strategy. It is a critical strategic plan for growth in Alexandrina Council for the whole of the area and for all the residents. And I think the events over the last 12 months or so have detracted from that importance. Whilst I appreciate that this matter is deeply personal for many, there is still no need to make that personal against others, whether it be other residents that share differing views, council members and particularly administration. I have found that this in particular situations very disappointing. There are various common themes throughout the feedback, including why are we planning for growth when there is insufficient infrastructure to sustain the current population? Protection of the environment is critical. Protection of prime farming land is critical. Preservation of individual townships is critical. Sufficient buffers roadside before development is critical, in particular to ensure that development in our area is completed in a way that preserves the character of townships as much as possible. Speaking about development more broadly, in my view, communities would be more accepting of development if it was done differently. You look at Mount Barker and Victor Harbour, we don't want that here. You look at rapid growth and development in other states and you can hardly see the houses as it is proactive planning and sufficient tree buffers. This does not happen here. Going through the different areas, it is clear there are many pros and cons with each, but with a growing population, we have a duty to get in front, be proactive and make decisions for not just now, but for our future generations. For example, Hindmarsh Island has experienced growth, but lacks services including postal service, even somewhere you can get a litre of milk. It's one way on, one way off, and the island is surrounded by an environmentally significant area, our river. Then we have Gore North, the creation of what looks like another suburb on farming land, which has seen significant pushback from the community. However, as I understand, we have no choice. Housing is coming and the majority is going to be there. If development is not undertaken with significant buffers, we will have a mini Mount Barker on our doorstep. Gore North East currently provides farming land and a view for our elderly at the neighbouring aged care facility. But the amount of housing that could be achieved there, where else should this go? Now going to Area Q. What has got the most attention throughout this process, a parcel of land which has a range of industrial, residential, mining activities being currently undertaken on the land. A parcel of land with significant environmental and cultural importance. I do want to make a few points about this area in particular. Protecting the environment is paramount, and when we talk about the Traeger land, this has never been in contention in my mind, like Councillor Miller said. It's continuously been acknowledged as something that is non-negotiable for the Traegers. The Traegers are a local family that have been giving back to the community for generations. Their motive, in my view, should never have been the subject of this matter. There are concerns that if we put a portion of the land in the South Coast Growth Strategy, that the remaining land will end up being developed as well. Any future uses of this land requires the engagement of the landowners. Whilst there are statutory provisions relating to environmental and culturally significant areas, it is not Crown land, it is not council-owned land. Council during the term of this chamber has not sought to ever rezone the land. This would have had to be undertaken by a council-led code amendment. This has not been undertaken. We are not the decision maker, the state government is. We can make decisions here about what we want to see with development, but it doesn't mean that this is guaranteed to occur, nor that development won't occur elsewhere. What I would like to see is very large rural blocks in this area as opposed to a mine. Just like mining activities, conditions can be placed on other forms of development. However, the protection of the conservation area is not negotiable. I do not support development on any other area within this land. My concern is not with the Traegers, nor has it ever been. My concern is with the remainder of the area and higher density housing, which I cannot support. The Traegers don't want anyone feeling sorry for them, but I do feel sorry for them, for the process that they've been through over the past 12 years. It is a decision which one which will not make everyone
Looks like
happy.
you're over time, Councillor Listener. Can you finish up?
Yep, but a decision which we need to make based on the information before us, advice provided by administration, community feedback, and our own views as well. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Like my colleagues, I really want to acknowledge our staff input in creating this document, the enormous amount of time and diligence that's gone into it. It's been amazing. However, it's been driven, the needs there, because of the government pushing development. And as I see it, it's an assault on the character of our district, from one end to the other. And it goes beyond our council, it goes into the city of Victor Harbor, but we're not talking about that tonight. I was one of the few, and I think Councillor Gardner, actually it was before I got into council, but I was in part of the council that gave support to the Traeger's proposal way back, which has been mentioned tonight. I have a great deal of respect for the Traeger family and for what they've done, and I regret the situation that they're in now greatly, and it breaks my heart to see how the situation has developed. However, there are certain aspects of this that do cause me concern. One of which, the main one, I think, is well, there are several. I've been concerned at some of the inconsistencies in the information that's been fed from both sides, which has not made it any easier to come to the decision that we're coming to tonight. The inclusion of the whole of Area Q into it, originally it was just Traeger's, but then suddenly Area Q cropped up, concerns me greatly. And unfortunately, Traeger's land is implicated in it, and I see it being potentially what you call the thin end of the wedge. I have no faith in big land business and what may happen in the future. And I question, I'm not a lawyer, but I wonder whether there would be a case to answer if the Traeger land was allowed to go ahead and the land adjacent to it, then the owners applied and they were knocked back when the other land went ahead and that went to arbitration. I would think that the Minister would be put in a very difficult position. And therefore, we then see what you might call bracket creep. We then find in due course the next piece over to Betcher Road. And then if you've done that, why not do the triangular piece back to the beach huts and complete the whole thing? And I'm in a real bind. I mean, I've lived in this district all my life. As I said, I think it's an assault on the character of the district. I've just spent a lot of today looking at the big developments that are happening at Murray Bridge. Totally different situation. A lot of industry, massive industry up there, people probably wouldn't even realise is occurring, and more to come. And the building and housing developments to go with it. Down here, we're different. Everybody's got to come down here. We are principally a tourist area surrounded by agriculture, which unfortunately is diminishing. And to plonk 8,000 dwellings just because there is this desire to go and populate this place, I find it abhorrent. I think I remember saying 100 years ago there was about 15 acres, I think it's 15 to 20 acres for every man, woman and child on this earth. That has shrunk to about 2.5 acres, I think, and it's expected to shrink to 1.5 acres in the future. Where does everybody think they're going to grow their food? And the area that we're talking about at North Goolwa has been all my life a very productive farming area. It's going to finish up with houses, probably pretty close together, you won't be able to get in between them, and grey roofs, black roofs, all the stuff that we see happening that's to me totally brainless, and that'll be our lovely south coast. And so that's the situation we're in.
You're over time, Councillor Scott. Yeah,
thank you. For those reasons, I'm afraid my decision has changed. I want to be quite open and honest about it so people understand. But for those reasons, I find that this could be the thin end of the wedge, and I support what is being suggested, that it be pursued as a park in the future. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Would you like your right of reply?
Well, thanks for the debate. That's precisely why I wanted to hear what everyone had to say on this particular aspect. I too, like others, was disappointed that Traeger land was not set aside from Area Q. It would have made a lot of difference to the information that was put out to the MySay site and other areas, and perhaps, like I said before, the 358 respondents we might have had a different result. 78.2% is a significant number. It still represents less than 20% of Middleton residents, and probably less than 1% of Alexandrina Council residents, not detracting from that MySay at all. But I do acknowledge that I'm sorry that the Traeger land has taken over from the entire South Coast growth strategy. I'm quite happy with everything else in that strategy, and it's a credit to the amount of work that's gone into it by our planning staff and our strategic people in planning. I still believe that the Traegers have every good intention. I was going to ask a question of Mr. Rowe about the amount of houses that could be installed on that 18 hectares remaining. I think I've got the answer now, and it wasn't all that big a number. But to get rid of the sand mine, obviously, was always foremost in my mind a good thing to do. So I'll leave it at that, and thanks for your input, members, and we'll see where it goes from here.
So that ends the discussion. So I'm going to put the recommendation, which is recommendation of Group B, as amended, to you. All those in favour? Against? It is lost.
Could I call for a division on that, please, Mayor?
So Councillor Kermans is calling a division. I remind elected members that a division is a new vote. Would those voting in the affirmative please stand? Have Councillor Thornton, Councillor Maidment, Councillor Miller and Councillor Oliver. Thank you. Would those voting in the negative please stand? Have Councillor Kermans, Councillor Livingston, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Gardner and Councillor Scott. It is lost. So we go to Councillor Nicholson. You had a foreshadowed motion. Do you wish to move it and speak to that?
Thank you, Worship. I wish to move the motion as it was originally printed in the agenda.
Can you speak to it?
And briefly speak to it. The South Coast Growth Strategy is so important for our community moving forward with the significant growth, not only that we've had, but that we know is projected for our region. And I really liked Councillor Miller's comment earlier that it's actually just the end of the beginning. A lot of work is going to start now on the back of a strategy that we have developed as a council for our community, particularly around infrastructure and particularly consulting with our community on how do we manage the growth, how do we continue to provide services and maintain the character that is so important to our community and that our community reiterate to us at every opportunity. it's been really difficult to navigate and think about all of the trade-offs that come with each portion of the South Coast Growth Strategy that has finally landed in there, and the areas that have come out as well. And I just want to acknowledge all of the community who have participated in that process over the last couple of years, all of the elected members in the chamber and the administration as well. It's been a really big journey, and this is the culmination of some really hard work that we've all done together. And I look forward to having this document for our community to guide our path forward. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Gardner, do you wish to speak?
This is a momentous occasion. The South Coast Regional Plan will ensure that growth will be in an orderly manner. Not everyone will be pleased. This plan has not come around quickly or ill-advisedly. This chamber made it very clear to the Minister that we were against the growth of North Goolwa, and our constituents made it clear to us as well. State government has made it explicit through the GARP that growth will happen on the South Coast. The target for Alexandrina Council for additional dwellings up to 2051 is considerable. The Greater Adelaide Regional Plan expects Alexandrina to have a strategic plan for growth. I honestly would not like to have more growth in my patch. Goolwa is big enough. However, there is no option. Therefore, it is imperative to take as much control over the North Goolwa residential growth as possible. To ensure an orderly pattern will emerge so that infrastructure can grow in concert with housing. Council needs to work and manage the kind of developments that reflects our values, and I feel sure that that's what will happen. Hindmarsh Island also has growth, which will reflect the nature of its limitations in terms of its limited transport corridor, and ensure efficient use of the land, and be mindful of the fragmented land ownership and limited infrastructure. Middleton too is to be challenged by growth. But the plan does not include Area Q. The South Coast Growth Strategy has been an exceedingly challenging process. It's caused great interest, angst, and heartache. There are planned stages to ensure sensible growth. There are 6 stages over the years ahead, infill and greenfields areas. In the past 30 years since I came to Goolwa, when Goolwa and Hindmarsh Island's population was not much more than 3,000 permanent residents, today it's nearly 9,500. This region along the South Coast is destined to a much greater growth than that. Council has a huge responsibility for managing this plan. I believe Council can do it. Please vote for this recommendation.
Any further discussion? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the strategy is a valuable blueprint for the future, and it's very well considered, and there has been a lot of consultation. Consequently, we now have a very sound understanding of potential growth and what it could look like. And I truly believe this will facilitate and underpin our future planning success. I'd like to also note that we're not the governing body as to what actually happens. The state government and the relevant bodies are, and that this is simply our contribution to the broader process. It is, however, a valuable tool to influence the outcomes, and we need to use it to help us advocate to the other levels of government for what we need to provide for future growth. Utilities, roads, medical services, hospitals and community services and facilities are critically important. I support the general growth principles, including a staged approach commencing with infill, the realistic growth numbers over time, growth being shared across the villages, and importantly, the maintenance of separation, identity and culture of our villages. It will be important though to maintain our centric planning models with town centres, height limits and density controls. Most importantly though, I think that this plan must integrate with our other strategic plans, our long-term financial plan and our service delivery plan. Reconciling the two in a fair and sustainable manner, I believe, will be the new key financial challenge of Council. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I am just going to comment on the huge amount of resources that have gone into this South Coast growth strategy. And over the years that I've been on council, it's been, you could say, at the cost of other priority issues. And by that I mean, we have a community in Strathalbyn that is growing at a rate, and I hope I get these right the right way, of 3 to 1 compared to the South Coast. It might be 2 to 1, whichever way it is, and Goolwa 2 to 1. It is significant. There is a Strathalbyn town plan that it has not been looked at for 12 years, apart from a DPA in 2018, which was dealing with something quite specific. So I hope that, I mean, this is a strategy document, but we have other local area plans that need to be prioritised, and they must now. We must send this on its way to wherever it lands, but keep our eyes on the bigger picture, which is not just Area Q, it is not just the South Coast, it is not just Goolwa North. We have a big district that is not a growth, that is not a tourist hub. We have people who live and breathe every day in other areas of our district that are not busy in intense periods of time. They are people living and breathing and working all year round in other communities that need, and I'm not having a crack at anyone here, but I understand the intensity of the resourcing of our planning department dealing with all of this. So I am disappointed that the Traeger land is not included, but it is a small portion of this strategy, and I feel the strategy was hijacked for whatever reasons, and I won't reflect on those. But I will reflect on that I hope the community reflects on this, and I'm sure that they will. And I hope they don't, well, I'm sure they'll see it as a victory, a certain element of our community. But now I hope there's healing, and I most definitely hope there is humility around this, because we are all humans, we are residents who care very deeply about where we live and what we love about where we live. And this is all being forced on us, and I understand those reasons too. And you know, I sat in when the Greater Regional Adelaide Plan was launched for comment, and it included the whole state basically. I sat in on a briefing and I asked specifically, not for the South Coast, but for Langhorne Creek and growers who are looking to diversify or exit the industry, but cannot because they have this noose that is constricting their townships and their ability to diversify, and it's called the EFPA. And I asked, will the Minister look at those areas and revisit them? It was a flat no, and the session is recorded. The answer from state government representatives at that briefing, and there were many others online. I was sitting in my car in my lunch hour doing this. The Minister is not interested in looking at EFPA areas. And then the spines came out for growth and the housing targets, and it all changed. So there is And as we heard tonight, you are at the whim and mercy of the elected state government. And I'm not going to enter into state decisions because that's not fair, and I'm disappointed that it's been drawn into tonight's debate. But the rules are the rules at the time that you make decisions, and I respect Councillor Scott's comments about what may happen in the future, but we all don't know. We're all at the mercy of political decisions. We have to do what's right for our community. And I support every aspect of this strategy. I think it's a wonderful, guiding, holistic document. But when the rubber starts hitting the road, and it will be years before this all starts to happen, things may have changed by then too. So I'm very grateful to be part of this chamber that's making this decision tonight. Yes, thank you, Worship. And my vote will reflect consistently what I have always said for 3 years, what I've said tonight, and I hope it doesn't reflect that I don't support the strategy. I would love it to have been unanimous, but I'm holding to my view that I think the Traeger land should be part of this, even though it's bigger than Area Q, this whole document. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Livingston.
Thank you, Mayor Parkes. I won't be supporting this motion for reasons that I touched on in the debate previously. I just can't support, in particular, there's parcels of land that we're developing, in particular Goolwa North. We had the same outcry by the local community that they didn't want that area developed, and I just can't put my name to voting for a plan that has it in it. I know that's not going to change the outcome. I know that we are in a position where we need this plan to be able to get infrastructure here, to be able to get services here, but I can't simply support it just because we are forced to. And I really do hope that at some point in time, a clear message is sent to the state government to do better.
Any further discussion? Councillor Nicholson, a question.
Your Worship, if this does get supported as it is, what happens next? Will we be making a decision of next steps in the event? And I'm not saying that it won't be passed. And I would also be interested in your thoughts, Your Worship. You didn't comment in the last debate on the last recommendations, and normally you close, or you have comments before people close. So I would very much seek your guidance and views on this.
I speak when I think I need to. Matt, did you want to ask the question about next steps?
Thank you. Through the Chair. The next steps, should the South Coast Growth Strategy be endorsed or approved by Council, would be that this document would become a guiding strategy that would assist in informing the local area plan, which is the document that will need to be tied to the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan to inform any future amendments.
Sorry, my question was, what if it's not? I understand what happens next if it is, but for this chamber, what does it mean if it's not? And will we decide what happens next tonight?
Through the Chair, it's difficult for me to answer that. There's probably multiple ways forward. If it's not endorsed in this form, we'd be seeking some direction about which direction would you like administration to go. There may or may not need to be further consultation if changes that the Chamber are interested in exceed what we've previously consulted on. I think that's a consideration as well. But ultimately, we're in the hands of the Chamber as the decision makers in terms of what happens next.
Any further discussion? Your right of reply? Yep.
Thank you, Worship. We have to make a decision on this strategy, because if we disengage from our significant role as a representative and a stakeholder on behalf of our community, then we are disengaging from having any influence on behalf of our community over how our region grows. And that would be incredibly disappointing for our community. It is our role. We have to make difficult decisions in this chamber sometimes. And I think back to the many workshops that we have had in developing this strategy, and the many hours of reading and flicking backwards and forwards between maps with changing lines and colours and priorities. We have done so much work on this, and I know that I'm not alone in this room when I think back to the times where I've just wished that we could not be involved at all, that we didn't have to choose between that parcel of land or that parcel of land. But the fact is, and it is articulated so well in this strategy, we are under pressure. People in our community need homes, our state needs homes, and the state government is asking us where we want to guide development in our region on behalf of our community. So we have to make these decisions. We have deliberated so carefully and in consultation with our community to develop this plan, and I think that we have a responsibility to make the decision. I don't think there is any benefit in delaying it. I think we need support. I'd love to see unanimous support for this strategy in the chamber tonight. And I just quickly want to touch on, again, what's in the strategy itself, the draft strategy. I think that it is a really valuable document for our community that explains why we have the strategy, how we've gone about the decision making, and what it means, how it can be used. I particularly like the staging that we've been able to demonstrate to our community. So I seek your support tonight, and I really hope this is a unanimous decision. Thank you.
So that ends the discussion. So put the recommendation group B to you. All those in favour? Against? That is carried.
Could I have a division on that as well, please?
So Councillor Coomans is calling a division. Just remind members that a division is a new vote. Would those voting in the affirmative please stand? Councillor Thornton, Councillor Coomans, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Gardner and Councillor Scott. Thank you. Would those voting in the negative please stand? Councillor Mayment, Councillor Miller, Councillor Oliver and Councillor Livingston. It is carried. We now go to recommendation group C. Yep. Councillor Gardner, you wish to move that and speak to it?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor Parkes. I'd like to move both of the points in Group C, but I would like to make some changes to the second point, and it is different words and it includes a little bit more, and I wonder if I'm allowed to do that, please. Thank you. The second point would be that Council holds discussions with relevant federal and state ministers and other related entities to request that the federal and or state government to acquire and purchase the sensitive wetland portion of the land in Area Q, amalgamate that land into the adjacent Tookaramore Reserve to ensure the protection, conservation and management of this environmentally and culturally important area. Colleagues, I hardly need to say anything more about this because we have all tonight, together with people within the gallery, talk about the importance of this area, and we were very fortunate to have Cedric here to be able to talk about the importance of culture and the Nuddenjerry. One of the wonderful things about the Nuddenjerry culture is when you walk along the beach at Goolwa, you see all the middens along the dunes And you know very well that behind those middens is the wetlands and the paperbark forest, the little, it is a little forest. It's a beautiful little area, and as Cedric says, the Nudungeri actually use that area to live in. And I can imagine that it would provide shade for them in the summer and protection in the winter. But all that area is so significant to them. It's only in the last few years that we've really begun to understand the importance of Aboriginal culture and what they lost, what was stolen from them. I'm sorry, we stole their culture and we stole their land. My relatives did that back in the 1800s. It's time we actually recognised how important the Nudungeri land is to them and how important it can be to us. So I hope you'll support this motion.
So we have a seconder, Councillor Oliver. You wish to speak?
Briefly, Mayor, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I think this vision to create this new conservation park is truly grand, and I'd like to do whatever I can to support it and make it happen. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I don't have an issue with this. I kind of do have a bit of an issue with being told to recognise the cultural, environmental and landscape values identified by the community. We know what the cultural, environment and landscape values are. It's not that we haven't recognised them. So I do take exception that they felt, I know why they pointed it out, but I don't need that pointed out to me or to, I'm happy to consciously recognise it and I'll support this, but you know, I think this council has a very good history of environmental stewardship. I think we have an exceptional reputation and have demonstrated First Nations sensitivities, and they weren't issues for me because they were never at risk for me. I just thought we were all on the same page with that, as is our community. However, I don't know why, and I'm happy to support this, but I won't be surprised if the federal and state ministers won't purchase it. Why would they? The Traegers were happy to give it away. They were happy to give it to the First Nations entities that were mentioned tonight. They were happy, you know, maybe they'll give it to the Crown or give it to Council. I really think we will struggle to get the state government to purchase it. And if they did, I wouldn't pay very much for it. So I'm assuming we are only talking about the non-Traeger portions of Area Q that in this, I just think that needs to be clear, and I assume that's what the sensitive wetland portion of the land in Area Q is, because it's not just the wetland area that I think has cultural sensitivity and environmental significance. So I'm happy to support this, but I think we could simplify it by saying request the Traegers give it to Council, and then we can control completely what happens to it. But anyway, I respect the intent of Councillor Gardner's motion, and that's why I'm happy to support it. But I do think Council already has a position on this when it comes to environmental, cultural and landscape values and how much we appreciate and respect and will protect them.
Any further discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Look, I fully support this. And in terms of the Traegers donating this land to somebody, there was a bit of a condition that some of the land would also be used for other purposes, which like the housing part. It's not a case of just giving away part of the land and then doing nothing with the rest. There was a bit of a pro bono, and I think that's very fair. I think this, in some way, might be assisting the Traeger family in what they are trying to do. And look, I pay full respects to them for their intentions. The intentions were there for a long, long time. It's just unfortunate that we didn't fully support the inclusion of that land into the South Coast strategy, and I still think it shouldn't. But I think that there's some compensation that should occur here, and the state and federal governments really need to step up to do that. And we did discuss this in previous meetings that we do something like that. So I fully support what Councillor Gardner's trying to do.
Councillor Livingston.
Thank you, Mayor Parkes. I, like my colleagues, am supportive of this motion, whilst admitting that it's potentially unrealistic that the government's going to purchase it. But I hope I'm proved wrong in that. I do wonder, with the consent of the mover and the seconder, noting what Councillor Miller said, and I completely agree with her on that. We know the cultural, environmental and landscape values. We didn't need the community to tell us that. So I would like to see a full stop at the end of values at point 1, and I would like to see at point 2, instead of other related entities, other related stakeholders, because that covers individuals, not just an entity.
Move in the second, happy with those changes? Right, second, happy with that? Just change it, let me get up there. Is that what you wanted, Councillor Livingston? Yep. So we need to leave the meeting to. Okay.
Would it be prudent to use the term that area identified under conservation in the plan that we were given, rather than just saying the wetlands, the area identified as conservation land on the plan? Would that be a better way of describing the area to be conserved, so they don't just put a fence where the wetland ends, because there is that lead in? So I'm just putting that up as a suggestion, and obviously up to the mover and the seconder to agree.
So the mover and seconder are happy with those additional changes?
Personally, sorry, Mayor, if I may comment, I think there needs to be a proper scientific process to identify what the sensitive wetland portion is. I don't think a planning grid does that.
Leave it as it was prior. Yep. Back to the original. We're back there. So we just need to leave it at chamber to take those changes. Everybody in favour of that? Yep. I just want to know if you're in favour of the changes. It's not a hard question, yes or no.
I thought it was a variation, not an amendment. I don't understand.
who are trying to get leave of the meeting to use the move and second have agreed to it, which want leave of the meeting to adopt it, to put it in. So, in favour? Anyone against? No, so that's in. So is there any further discussion? No. So Councillor Gardner, would you like to use your, or Councillor Nicholson, your right of reply? No, it's not. Councillor Gardner. Sorry, I'm trying to run around this bloody mess here.
Thank you,
Gardner. Yeah.
Mayor Parkes. Part of the reason for actually suggesting this part of the overall motion was that state government, this state government, is very interested in the environment. And in fact, not very long ago, earlier this year, I think, or late last year, they actually purchased Mundu Island and U Island for environmental reasons. So this is not a big piece of land, but it is an important piece for us as South Coast residents. So I think, frankly, I've got my fingers crossed.
So ends the discussion on the recommendation of Group C. I'll put that to you. All those in favour? Against? Against? It is carried unanimously. That brings our meeting, or item 9 is confidential items, there are none. Item 10 is closed. That's the end of our meeting. I'd like to thank you members of the gallery very much for your perseverance and patience and your enthusiasm and sticking with us through the night. And I must commend you on your behaviour. It's exceptionally good. Thank you very much.
South Coast Television, your community, your voice.